Hello and welcome to the Work and Wellbeing Podcast with me, your host, Eileen Donnelly. I have been chatting to Louise Cashman from Mott MacDonald. We had an incredible conversation about their risk-based and data-driven approach to wellbeing strategy. And frankly, it was nothing short of impressive. They really have gone all out to look at all indicators of how people are feeling and how they're performing in their roles. So they've got lots and lots of data and metrics, but it's really about the insights that they're drawing from that, and then how they use that insight to take informed action and ultimately have an impact on the individual. So I started by asking Louise to tell me a little bit about herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Louise Cashman, a business psychologist, currently doing my occupational psychology chartership, Wellbeing Manager for Mott MacDonald, and just about to go on maternity leave for a year. So I'll take up another role that I'm probably less competent in, to be honest.
One that I'm absolutely sure you will excel at. Let's start with a really big picture. What was the inspiration for Mott MacDonald to shift towards what is quite clearly a risk-based but data-driven wellbeing strategy? Why is wellbeing now considered as a business critical issue for Mott MacDonald?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say when I joined the organisation, we were in the throes of the pandemic. So that called for a much more reactive response to wellbeing. And since coming out of that culturally, we have really focused on being more preventative, proactive. We know that that's ultimately the right thing for the organisation and for our colleagues. It's much more of a moral choice to be preventative and proactive. We don't want to be in positions where it's been months that a colleague might be struggling and that then leads to additional mental health illnesses. And also there's better returns to the organisation if we shift to being preventative and proactive. And with my background in psychology, I like to bring that rigour and that risk-based approach is really getting to the root cause of things. Therefore, will have more impact for the organisation. So it's a win-win all round, really, to shift into that space.
I think it's great, isn't it? Because as you do right for the employee, for the individual, you do right for the organisation. And I think that's what's so wonderful about this particular topic, as we say, the risk-based approach. And risk-based approach only works if you've got the data. So data is clearly playing a central role in helping the shaping of the strategy. Can you just walk us through the different types of data that you're analysing that's identifying those core wellbeing risks, and then obviously how you then translate that into targeted interventions?
Yeah. So when I joined the organisation in 2022, the first thing I did was look at what information we even have in the first place. So at Mott MacDonald, we are lucky we have got a lot of rich information. The trick is then how we best analyse it. So when I first joined, I looked at what was even possible to collect. It was anything from our sickness absence, our exit, interviews and voluntary redundancy information, employee engagement surveys. We have critical incident reporting and things like positive interventions, which not all organisations will have. And because we're a consultancy, we also have timesheet data, so we can look at fatigue information and overtime data. So the first thing I did was collect all of that and look at across as many surveys and qualitative and quantitative data points as possible. And the three key trends that came out of that were workload, work pressure, work-related stress, which absolutely aligns to external data as well. When you look at CIPD, it's typically around kind of job demand and workload that is the greatest wellbeing risk. So that came through for us as well, Mott MacDonald, for Europe.
It's interesting that you genuinely do have so many data points, but as you rightly say, data only really works for you if you're able to analyse it and get the insight that comes out of it. And as you say, the statistics are there. CIPD have them, Deloitte, Mental Health Foundation, and certainly probably one of the most striking statistics out there around mental health is that 1 in 4 employees will be experiencing mental ill health and poor mental health. And of course, that's the individual level. We talk about the organisational level as well. That's costing organisations a huge amount. And this is where Deloitte have estimated it to be up to 56 billion a year, which is just colossal. So a lot of the challenge around mental health, of course, is the stigma. Because without disclosure of mental health, we can't get the data necessarily. So how is Mott MacDonald really tackling that stigma and supporting mental health proactively?
We're doing quite a lot in that space, mostly through our campaigns. So we have taken on some pretty difficult topics to talk about, to educate, to share personal stories in. So when we look at our campaigns, we think about what topics are going to have the greatest impact based on our demographics. So we do actually take a data-informed approach based on where our risks may be. So, for example, we've seen an increase of divorce and separation being a reason why people contact the employee assistance program. So using that data-informed approach to think about what campaigns will have the greatest impact. Of course, all our data is confidential and aggregated, so we don't know who exactly that is. But then using that to think about what campaigns will be the most beneficial for our colleagues. But there's others that we take some assumptions on. So, for example, the topic of domestic abuse, if we think about how many people that affects in the UK, for example, and then work that out based on our demographics and how many colleagues we have, we know that there are going to be people affected by that. We take those difficult subjects and we ask people to come forward if they're comfortable, either anonymously or not, to share their stories. Those personal stories, I think, that bring some of those to life and make people realise that they're not alone and think about what helped them that may then help others. Yeah, some of those stories then have been around menopause. We touched on mental health topics, and we also asked our senior leaders to sponsor the campaign or share their story. It might be about them or maybe a family member. And I believe that sharing authentically from the leadership team is also really helpful to create that psychological safety and that culture to say it's okay to speak up when something's not right. So it's predominantly through our campaigns that we do that, but then there's also lots of training available for our line managers. And yeah, just increasing the conversation. We have got an amazing wellbeing community as well. When we combine our mental health first aiders and our wellbeing champions, we've got over 140 people that can support people throughout the regions. I think the conversations are the starting point.
Yeah, that's great. That's quite an army, a force that sort of is sort of dissipated amongst the organisation. And those lived experiences can be so powerful in reducing stigma because, as you say, it shows that other people are experiencing the same thing. It normalises. And certainly from organisations I've worked with, it's always quite startling when you open the conversation and people maybe for the first time in their lives realise they're not alone. This is really quite common. And that in itself is incredibly powerful for someone to feel that they don't need to be silent. They don't need to be isolated in what they're experiencing. So powerful, powerful stuff. And then to think that leaders are doing it too, this is, we know mental ill health is indiscriminate in how it affects people. So just because you're a leader doesn't mean you're immune. And certainly I imagine the pressures of leadership can mean sometimes you're more susceptible to it as well. So brilliant that is happening in the organisation. So a slightly different tack, because I know that you've done an awful lot of work around ISO 45003, the risk standard, and it's very central to your approach now. How have you managed to integrate that standard into everyday operations, both at an individual but also project level?
That's been a big undertaking to get that off the ground. And it was actually born from one of our health, safety and wellbeing leads who recognised that because we're a project-based organisation, it would be great to apply that methodology to our projects originally. What we did in collaboration with one another was take the ISO standard and create a question set for our project managers, identifying which risks would be most area of concern for their projects. And then once you complete that question set, you have some control measures and mitigative actions to create an action plan for that project. So I've really simplified what we've done there, but we've actually converted that into an app, which is now accessible globally for Mott MacDonald. It's gone live in Europe, and then it's going to be rolled out next in the Middle East and India. And that is one of the ways that we are addressing it at a project level. So just to give an example then, I've recently done some wellbeing consultancy externally as well. We're on a joint venture, and I've used that framework and that app on that joint venture, and it's created a 12-month action plan. Wow. So it can be used really strategically, and ideally how it's used is systemically. So it's addressing those root causes at the point of winning a piece of work with a client. So the earlier in the project life cycle, the better. And what we then done is identified where we have got risks that may come up in the project life cycle, and we've got actions to best support our colleagues. So it's really used preventatively if it's done at that early stage. And then we've also got an individual level one. So that is literally for one person, one colleague that may be experiencing work-related stress. And that is actually against the HSE management standards. So those 6 key areas, and we've added 2 additional areas in as well. So that has also been introduced within the app. And the intervention really should be at the point where someone's stress has increased. So we don't want it to be at the point where someone has gone off on sick, for example. So the earlier you can intervene, the better it is for the colleague and ultimately the business. So
amazing. I mean, it's really innovative. You're really sort of pushing this really out there in terms of how you're responding to ISO 45003. I don't know any other organization is doing it in this way. And then to think that you're introducing that into a JV and your projects as you partner with people. Yeah. I mean, it really is impressive. And I'm hearing all the time this idea of preventative, and the more data you get, the more that you can follow that approach. You mentioned just before around this idea of workload, the work demand, and internal pressures. Obviously, you're a consultancy, a very, very large consultancy. That's almost the nature of the beast. Yeah. But of course, it is about identifying those root causes. So can you tell me a little bit, what were the root causes in the regional-wide project that you did, and how are you addressing those on the ground?
That's a massive project. Yes, I've just concluded a 3-year project. So when I joined the organisation, I touched on this earlier, I looked at the entire data set. I then ran focus groups with the regional executive team as well as the unit executive team to identify what those root causes were for those 3 risks. So asking questions around what are the root causes for work-related pressure, stress and workload, and also what are potential solutions to addressing that. And then also ran focus groups with a representative sample of our colleagues to see what compared and contrasted. So when I did the thematic analysis, we identified 11 key themes, and 9 of those mapped with the colleagues, and 2 additional themes came through from the colleague group. So we ultimately have 13 key themes that we then ran a risk assessment with, back with the unit execs, to ask what the colleague impact score was, the business impact score, and the likelihood of the risk occurring. What we then had was a profile for each of the Europe units. That meant that each unit could then create a bespoke plan against their themes and their key risks. So we identified 3 main priority areas across the region, which were regarding planning and change management, resources and demand, and autonomy and empowerment. So there are 3 priority areas for the region, but then each unit might have different priorities based on their profile. And they've been action planning against those for the last 18 months. So very recently reassessed. So it's a massive undertaking because it's quite a bit of time of each of the execs to go back through the question set. And we've identified that every single trend other than one has reduced in likelihood. So what that's suggesting is, and this is evidence from the commentary from the risk assessment as well, is that based on the actions they've been undertaking, things like new resource plans, additional maybe additional training that's been undertaking. There's been loads underway that has actually decreased the likelihood of that risk occurring.
Amazing.
So really
Absolutely
pleased
amazing.
with the outcome.
I bet, because I know how much of a piece of work this has been. And what's really interesting, because we're often hearing this idea of more individualized plans to promote well-being, etc. And you've done it at this sort of site level, project level. You've got themes that go across an entire region, but you're really identifying what actions need to be taken based on their individual assessments. So it's a really tailored plan. So I guess it stands to reason you're seeing those results after only 18 months, which I think is testament to the amount of effort that's been put into this, and also how Mott MacDonald have really embraced this as well. It's impressive. You're really leading the way on this.
Thank you. And I'd say, the exec have been really proactive in getting involved. They've made themselves readily available. They want to know what the outcomes are and what the actions are. So, definitely can't do it without them involved in their engagement. So that's been great. Pleasantly surprised to see each of the themes go down. Interestingly, some of the themes have also flipped on their head to, rather than being a risk, being actually an enabler. So couple of examples with that are, bearing in mind 18 months, we were just coming out of the pandemic. So some of the themes, for example, were regarding technology and the fact we're on back-to-back calls and hybrid working and not feeling that we maybe had a total grip on knowing if people were okay when they were working from home, but actually those now turning into real key enablers and positives rather than risks. So some real shifts happening in that space based on adapting, finding out new ways of working, becoming more educated in that space, and technological advancements such as Copilot, actually, rather than technology being a hindrance and those back-to-back calls, finding new ways of working, and also, things like Copilot really being that enabler. So I thought that those results were really interesting as well.
Yeah, it's great to see how what was a risk, what is deemed as negative, can then really shift and turn into an opportunity. I mean, there's definitely an element of real cultural shift here, and
yes,
I expect the leaders have been a big part of that. Is there anything else that's helped change that culture around all of this?
Yeah, definitely the leaders having a voice, definitely our campaigns. I think the increase of educating and talking about it, raising the profile of wellbeing, it's now become business as usual. It's embedded within our practices. So I think I've been fortunate. I've got someone with a strong PR and comms background in my team that's really helped push the agenda of raising awareness, the fantastic team effort here. I'm just trying to think if I've missed anything else. I think that's the key things really that have helped, but using that data has helped us build credibility and demonstrate that we're having an impact. And I think, not falling into the trap of, for example, only looking at sickness absence, looking more holistically at well-being, because ultimately it affects things like people's engagement at work, productivity, job satisfaction, their whole employee experience. It's not just looking at, very narrow-mindedly looking at sickness absence and a cost. It's actually looking at how are people feeling when they log on every day, and
Amazing.
What is their experience when they're interacting with their colleagues or their managers or their project teams. So it's so much broader, and I think having that awareness in the business is also really a key enabler as well.
Yeah. You know what? I want you to bring this to life to us. That you must have some stories that spring to mind, moments where you feel really proud of all that you've achieved. Have you got any stories or case studies where this has really resonated and made you feel proud of what you've achieved?
Do you know what? I think for me, it's sometimes when we receive that one message from someone following a really difficult campaign. I mean, I've even shared some of my personal stories and people reaching out to say, do you know what? I've gone through something similar and I haven't talked about it with anyone for 18 years, but I now feel that I can. So I think sometimes for me, it's not always the big data sets or showing a reduction of something, or it's those really personal messages of people saying, that story has enabled me to face something I needed to face. I'm now getting help. I now feel that I can talk about it. I'm now fronting into something that I've maybe put off for however many years. I think for me, they're the wins. And to know that you've even helped one person to that extent, I think is really, that's where I get a lot of satisfaction.
I bet, and you deserve that given the amount of effort you put into this. And those stories, yeah, they're what really drive it at the end of the day. To know that it is actually making a difference. The data sets are absolutely imperative, but it's probably through that you're then able to make that difference and that impact at the individual level. Just absolutely brilliant. So I guess, we know what next for you. You're going to be off being a mummy, but what's next for Mott MacDonald? Where does this journey go next? And what's that going to look like?
Yeah, great question. So for us, it's definitely around improving our data analysis. I think we've got really rich data, but it's now been really clever in how we use that, analyze it. We definitely need some support from some data scientists and absolute whizzes in that space to help us make better sense of what the information is telling us. So I think data is a really key one. We'll continue to embed. I think for us, we've actually got loads of resources, but it's now embedding that, making people more aware of them, making it part of day-to-day practice, because that app has gone live for the projects and individuals, but it's not currently part of our day-to-day working process, because that's global and we need to embed it in that system. So it's a little bit standalone at the minute, and it's going to be used off the back of people knowing that it's best practice. So how do we then embed that into standard practice? So yeah, definitely something around, I think we've got most of the resources we now need. It's now embedding them. So they're the key focuses for the next probably 24 months.
And I think when people see the success it's having, the change it's managing to achieve, it sounds like people will want to use it, and it will naturally be embedded, which is really good news. And hopefully by the time you come back, you'll be able to see that it's being used and it's entirely embedded.
Yes. I mean, the great news is people are reaching out, and this is where I'm like, this is just so rewarding to see that people are starting to hear about it, and they are reaching out proactively to say, I think my project will really benefit from this.
That's great.
And I actually think that sometimes can be more than when it's built in the system and you have to do something, because people are recognizing the value of their own accord and proactively reaching out to follow that best practice. So that has started happening now, which is really good.
Yeah, that's great, isn't it? Sometimes mandating something actually prevents it from moving as quickly into day to day. So just to conclude, I like to give my guests a magic wand. So I'm going to give you a magic wand as well. I don't know how you're going to use it, but you can do whatever you want with your magic wand. It can be related to everything we've spoken to or something completely different. But if you wanted to make a change overnight with your magic wand, what would you do with your magic wand?
Is it like I get 3 wishes, like a genie in a bottle, or have I just got one?
You've only got one, so
Only
use it wisely.
Oh, that's a tough one. What I think for me, because I actually do see this day to day, and not just at work, outside of work, is that people would feel more comfortable to speak up if they're struggling. And I think that's sometimes the thing that keeps me up at night the most, is that people are struggling. They might not even understand why, because they might be experiencing neurodiversity or mental health illness where they actually don't know what is wrong. They just know something feels wrong, but then they don't know where to go or who to support, or they're embarrassed or ashamed, and they really don't have to be, because you wouldn't be if you broke your leg. You would speak up if you were in pain, and some people are emotionally in pain and they're not speaking up. So I think for me, it would be that people would feel more comfortable to come forward and share how they are and be supported through that journey and get the help they need. So something I am the most passionate about is that people being their best, whatever that looks like for them, And that is why I work in wellbeing. So I'm so passionate about people reaching their potential and being their best. So anything that prevents that, for me, I would love to overcome that.
Amazing. That's a brilliant thing to do with your magic wand. So thank you so much.
Say data, that would have been really boring, wouldn't
You
it?
can't. The human is what you're all about. So thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And I appreciate you taking the time, because I know you're literally about to whisk off on maternity leave. So all the very, very best.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great. Thank you, Eileen.
What a really impressive conversation, and wonderful to hear Louise's success, even right down to that individual case study. So thanks for listening. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, then please like, rate or subscribe. Really helps spread the word about the Work and Wellbeing Podcast.